everyone. I'm Angela Kirkian, Director of Education at PPA, and today we get a chance to chat with Joe Edelman. Joe's an Olympus Visionary photographer and a fantastic photo educator. So we're excited to have you on, Joe. Thanks so much for joining us.
Angela, thanks for having me. It's my pleasure. Looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, well, and I love talking to you. Every time I talk to you, we end up talking for a very long time because you have so much to share and so much to say. So I'm just going to warn everybody ahead of time. This might be a long one. But I love that because you have such great advice. You've been part of this industry for a really long time. Sorry, I'm not calling you old, but you have been, you've done a lot. Your experience in this ranges from, photojournalist to portraits and weddings, product, commercial, and now as an educator for photographers to really help them own their place as professionals. And so you do have an amazing breadth of knowledge to share with us. So again, thank you.
Well, thank you.
I know we wanted to start today to one of the questions we talk a lot, currently with our situation going on as we're coming out of being at home and kind of what's that next phase look like and embracing the change that obviously has to happen in our businesses and is occurring, as we speak. So I would just love to hear your thoughts on kind of moving forward, what we're looking at.
Wow. Well, I mean, there's so much to consider. It's like, I think on one hand, we are starting to see already, large portions of the country are opening up, kind of getting back to normal. But I think the key is understanding that normal, it's a new normal. And, whether we like it or not, I like to remind photographers along the way and remind myself, especially since I've been at it for so long, that the world evolves. And we all know how that concept of evolution worked out for dinosaurs, right? So the challenge is not to become a dinosaur. Now, even though it's only been 2 to 3 months for some people, it's been kind of a very dramatic and very extreme 2 to 3 months from a business standpoint. And even as we do kind of return, a lot of people are still very tentative. A lot of photographers are in situations like wedding photographers where the events that they would be, paid to cover and to photograph aren't able to happen yet, even though we're returning to normal. So, I think that photographers have got to be aware of that and really kind of building and reshaping their business model around that. I think that any photographer that just thinks, well, it will go back to normal and maybe it'll be slow for a while everybody gets back on their feet. I think that that's a photographer that's potentially making a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like consumers, just our world in general, we've gone through a very traumatic time, and it's going to change us not for the short term, but really for the long term. And what does that look like? So trying to get a handle on that. What are some of the changes that you think photographers may need to be aware of in their own businesses as we move forward?
Well, I think, if we look at it from the standpoint of just general communication, I like to remind photographers that we are in a people business. Now, I don't care if you're photographing products or weddings or what you're photographing, but we're in a people business. Business takes place between two people. So in the past, of course, there's a lot of benefit to FaceTime. And I don't mean the Apple app. I mean, being face-to-face with a client, being able to have a discussion with a client. I'm all about technology. I love email. I love being able to use text messages for business communications to streamline things. But the relationship aspect of that arrangement that I have with my client, that needs some FaceTime from time to time. And one of the things that I think will change as we go forward is that clients have realized that they can actually get a lot done without the FaceTime, but there's a new norm for FaceTime. It's actually what you and I are doing. We're on a Zoom.
Right.
So, there's that digital communication, but it still involves being able to see each other, which is so much nicer than being able to talk on the phone. I think that photographers have to make sure that they don't allow themselves, honestly, to get lazy with the idea that, well, all this digital communication is great because I don't have to set aside this time. Maybe I don't have to get dressed today. I can stay in my pajamas, but I still need to talk to my client. I encourage photographers with your business communications. You should be the aggressors in the sense of, hey, let's do a Zoom call. And if anything, let your client push back and say, you know what, I don't have time to get in front of the camera, but we'll talk by phone. Well, okay, if that's their choice at that time, but you should be the one that's making that call to say, hey, let's chat face to face. That applies not just for business communications. That applies for, hey, I've got an engagement portrait coming up. Even if you're going to do the social distancing and do it in a park, you should be having communications with your couple in advance. And I don't mean the basic stuff of, hey, let's meet Saturday at 1:00 and this is where we're going to meet. But obviously, hopefully every photographer is aware if they're doing that type of shoot, they should be talking about outfits. They should be talking about picture ideas. But part of the reason for getting on a Zoom call and having that FaceTime, if you can't get them actually in front of you, is to build that relationship. Your shoot's going to go 10 times better on Saturday at 1:00 if you've already started to establish that relationship, because you want that couple to be at ease. You want them to have confidence in you. Don't be fooled by thinking that just comes because you have a portfolio full of great pictures. That's kind of the legwork. I like to look at it. Steve Jobs gave a very famous commencement speech at Stanford, and he talked about the idea of connecting the dots. And I think that's the key to success for any photographer moving forward is to pay attention to your clients, pay attention to your own needs, pay attention to the new ways that people are connecting and doing business. And you've got to find ways to connect the dots from your needs and your business model to these new changes. It's not that the idea of being face-to-face and talking is going away or will ever go away, but there's a really good argument to say maybe we won't do as much of it in business as photographers.
And people are comfortable with this now. Like this
Yes.
has really made people very comfortable with Zoom calls.
Exactly, right. I mean, we kind of didn't have a choice, and now people have realized, hey, there's a lot of benefits. I mean, heck, we even have major corporations that are talking about having employees work from home, on a permanent basis. But those same corporations also acknowledge the need to be able to have really, really good communication. And that's where these tools like Zoom, come into play. So it is all about using them. It is, and just like anything else, it's a presentation. So it is about, getting up, getting dressed, making sure your hair is not a mess, wear makeup, but that's how you feel you look your best, because that's going to make you present yourself better in the process. So it's really all the same things that we would have done, if you had a studio and people were going to come and sit down on the couch. Even I heard somebody talking yesterday about the idea of, well, how will we do in-person print sales and things like that? It's like, well, sure, there's a lot of value to be able to sit on a sofa in front of someone and maybe even I know a lot of photographers do in-person sales. They'll open up a bottle of champagne and have some nice little desserts there, and they've got a big print already mounted to show it off. And obviously those are tried and true sales techniques. But now in this, COVID world that we live in, and especially, God forbid, if this comes back in the winter and we're dealing with this lockdown concept again, how do we do it? Well, again, it's connect the dots. The photographer that I was listening to talked about the fact that during this whole lockdown, he went online, ordered a bottle of champagne from a company that ships them, had it shipped to the couple's house. He was going to show them their wedding images. So the wedding had taken place pre-COVID. So also sent them a little basket snack pack, and they arranged essentially a photo date. They got on Zoom, and he had used a little bit of technology so that he could do really, really nice screen shares. And he had even gone to a stock photo site and found a couple images that had nice, big, fancy picture frames on walls in rooms that were similar to the type of decor that he had learned because he had built a relationship with this couple that they had. Put a few of their images into the frames in Photoshop. So he was actually able to show them some examples of like, look, this is why you need to get this image printed big. Like, how amazing would this look? All the same things that he would have been doing in person.
Yeah.
And so he turned it into an event. And yes, he spent a little bit more money getting that champagne delivered, getting the basket delivered. But in the end, it paid off because he was able to make a very personal connection and make that couple feel very special that he had gone to all this trouble, taken this time. So really kind of set the right emotional tone to be able to show these pictures digitally. He even went so far as to really make sure with them that they knew, like, look, you've got to be on a computer. You don't want to do this on your phone.
Right. Right.
Like, so he was making sure that they were going to set aside the time and be in a spot where they could look at the pictures big and all of that. So
Right.
it's connecting the dots. We've just got to be looking at how do we do business in the ways that we know really work,
Mhm.
but realize that some of the steps are evolving, that we have to change them a little bit.
Sure. And honestly, even before this happened, I think people are valuing their time, so finding ways to help them, save time, not having to drive to a studio like that. I think it solves quite a few problems,
It does,
just
absolutely.
on the big picture. But so as people are kind of progressing and getting into this, one of the questions we hear often from members, PPA members, is should I niche, or should I be a generalist? And you and I had a great conversation about that.
Yeah. So I have to give you two answers. In other words, I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth. Okay. I am a big, firm believer in kind of the tried and true advice of don't be a jack of all trades and a master of none. Let's face it, in real life, we wouldn't hire a plumber to fix our electric, and we wouldn't want a podiatrist to fix, our plastic surgery for our nose. We just wouldn't do that, right? So we ultimately want someone that we know is really good at what they do. I don't think that has necessarily changed. However, I would introduce another word into the conversation, and I think that word is pivot. So even to use, my own example, the last speaking engagement that I did was the first week in March. It was in Fort Myers, Florida for the Florida Camera Club Council. And I got on a plane that weekend, came back to Allentown, and the lockdown in Pennsylvania started 1 week later.
Yeah.
Because my wife is high risk, even for that week, I had already pretty much said, yeah, we can't go anywhere. We're done. And my spot in Allentown still has not reopened. We've got another 3 days before we're released at all. So we still don't have restaurants. We still don't have any of that kind of stuff. We're still locked down here. So the challenge that I ran into immediately is by the time the lockdown was put into place, a week when I came back from Florida, literally like dominoes, every speaking engagement, every workshop that I had planned, every trade show that I had planned for the year was starting to either postpone or just be canceled.
Yeah.
So I literally on the plane home from Florida was talking to my wife about how excited I was about this year because my speaking schedule was so packed. I do have a few commercial clients that I still maintain. They had projects lined up. This was going to be a banner year, and it went to nothing overnight, like nothing. So I have always been somewhat of an entrepreneur in terms of my mindset. So, my philosophy was, and here's the word, how do I pivot? I'm not going to stop being a photographer. I'm not going to give up. I am going to be an optimistic human being that this whole situation we'll get through it. We need to do the things that we need to do, but we'll get through it. But in the meantime, how can I be productive as a human being and how can I earn money?
Right.
So for me, it was a matter of starting to make changes and do online teaching, using webinar platforms and things like that. And I've been able to replace more than 3/4 of my income over the course of the last 2 months that I've lost. So a lot of hard work that I did not plan on doing. I spent a lot more sleepless nights in the process because I was up late, getting materials together. But I think that every photographer needs to kind of, and honestly, every business person, this isn't even a piece of photography advice, this is business advice. I'm a big fan of not having a plan B. I do think that when we have a plan B, we kind of set ourselves up to fail. But I do think as a business person, you can't do business with blinders on. You have to pay attention not only to trends and changes in your specific business, but you've got to look at the bigger picture of the world around your business and how is it impacting your business. And I think part of that is kind of always trying to be in, and it's a mindset, it's an attitude, it's a value set of always wanting to kind of be a step ahead in your thought process in terms of the what if, type mentality. I have a friend locally here in Allentown, Pennsylvania, who shoots portraits and weddings. He had one commercial product client that he did product shots for a few times a year. As soon as this whole shutdown went into full gear, he reached out to that client immediately just to see, hey, any chance there's going to be work coming? And indeed there was. But he also, that client, he's worked for them for a couple of years. He hit them up and said, hey, so do you guys know of anybody in similar businesses or other manufacturing businesses in the area that I might be able to reach out to see if they're looking for work? And then instead of really pulling back and being afraid of the idea that I'm losing a lot of my business right now, he spent I think it's like 500 some bucks a year for a LinkedIn premium membership so that he could get better access on LinkedIn, and went out and started aggressively contacting business owners that are within like a 50-mile radius of here in Allentown, and actually picked up several new clients and has been crazy busy through this whole time doing product work. Because while we were all, basically in lockdown, most of the companies that sell on websites like Amazon, they were still adding products. They were still, shipping material and that. So it's kind of that idea of there's always an opportunity. I know a wedding photographer locally, when everything happened and the weddings all started dropping, she turned around right away and started reaching. She's fairly good with design, not a graphic designer by trade, but she started reaching out to her wedding clients for the year and saying, hey, listen, if your wedding plans are going to change, I can help you. We can create, basically using your pictures from your engagement session that we did, we can create kind of little cards to be able to send out to your attendees to let them know, hey, we're going to postpone the date, or we're going to do this. So she was actually pulling in additional revenue by doing a little bit of graphic design work and including the images. She went online, she found a printer, so everything was able to be shipped and drop shipped. So there didn't have to be interaction, and she was able to charge these folks for that as a service. So she was reaching out to these people even before they made the decision to cancel, their wedding, or to postpone their, I shouldn't say cancel,
Right.
postpone their wedding, right? To basically say, hey, look, when you get to that point, if you get to that point, don't stress, I can help you with this. And I can help you put together some resources that are going to allow you to communicate it better and things like that. So it is, it's kind of a matter of, when we're faced with times like this, go and have your meltdown, because I sure did. I had a couple of them, and
So did
then
we all.
right. You have to get up in the morning and say, okay, so what are my options? What could I do? What might I do?
So, so what I'm hearing you say is being proactive, obviously, is a big piece of that. Also looking at your client needs and where you can fill those needs. And if you don't have that skill set, get that skill set.
Yep.
Right.
Well, and that's one of the things that I think is also important. So, let's face it, this whole situation nobody could have really predicted what this was going to be like. But I started a little thing, since I have a YouTube channel and I do a lot of online teaching now. So as soon as this lockdown started, thank you. Well,
if you want to tell our audience about your YouTube, that'd be awesome, because you have some fantastic content on there.
My YouTube channel is real simple. It's all about the hows and the whys behind photography. So I don't talk about gear. I don't get into all that stuff. I am primarily known as a portrait shooter. So it is mostly things that relate to photographing people, both in the studio and on location. But I started a thing called the Stuck at Home Challenge, because I figured, well, I'm stuck at home. I can't schedule a photo shoot. I can't bring a makeup artist in. I can't bring, subjects in. So I started doing abstract photography just to keep shooting and to really try to get people off their butts and realize, like, hey, don't put your cameras down because of this, right? The camera can be a great escape. But I think one of the things that gets lost in these situations is that even if you are in a situation where you can't pivot, I mean, if you literally are at the point where I've got to go out and I've got to hope that I can get the small business loan, or I can hope that I can get unemployment, and you don't see a way, that doesn't mean you kind of just give up and the cameras sit in a bag and nothing happens. I mean, I'm sorry, but I don't care how long you've been shooting. We can always use practice. I've yet to meet the photographer, myself included, even though I teach and talk a lot about it. I've yet to meet the photographer that couldn't afford to spend some time refining their marketing, meaning updating the website, tweaking things, refining things, really fine-tuning their social media, and God forbid, actually having a social media plan, because so many photographers, their plan is, post my next picture. That's the plan.
We're going to get you back to talk about creating a social media plan.
And then the other thing is, we talk about this pivot, but it's the idea of taking advantage of the time to actually learn new skills. Mm-hmm. I think it all kind of, for me at least, I shouldn't speak for other people. For me, it comes back to the idea that I frequently joked, you talked about the different phases of my career. I frequently joke with people that I still don't know what I'm going to do when I grow up, because I don't. I do know that it will involve a camera. From the very beginning, you know, it's involved the camera and has been the constant thread throughout my life, and it will continue to be that. So I think that a lot of it is a matter of passion meets survival, in the sense that if you're really passionate about this, then, you know, you look for ways. Humans are innately, we're wired to be problem solvers. We just are. That's how we have evolved. That's how we have the technology that we have. Mm-hmm. And I think everybody's capable of that to some degree. And especially with all the resources we have now, you know, YouTube and Google and the internet in general. I mean, obviously, even with organizations like PPA opening up all of the educational resources, we have these really what are gifts, because believe me, I wish I had some of these resources when I was a kid and I was learning. So we really don't have an excuse not to do it. It's a matter of, are you passionate enough about it? Does it matter enough to you? And then you got to put in the work. Yes, it sucks we had to go through this and we had to do it, but we all had to go through it and we've all had to make the changes. So.
And we're fortunate that we have a product that people want and need.
Yes.
As we're evolving. I think that's a huge thing to not forget, just how important photography is, you know, in so many aspects of our world.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So what do you, as far as like working on your social media and your marketing, is there any advice that you would give our audience on something specific that they could be doing right now to kind of, again, just reconnect or stay connected?
So I would say two things, but I'll actually tie them together. Okay. The one area that most photographers could stand to really dramatically upgrade their website and social media is to change their attitude. And what I mean by that is this: understand that it's not about you and it's not about your photography. Most photographers' about pages, when you go to the about page on their website, starts out something along the lines of, I got my first camera 3 years ago, and I really like taking pictures, and I have a Sony, or I have a Nikon, or I have an Olympus, and like, nobody gives a damn about any of that stuff. They just don't. So first of all, I mean, think about that. I got my first camera 3 years ago. That's actually not that impressive. So I don't even know why you would admit to that. But the challenge is, and so follow along, folks, because this might sound a little confusing, but I promise. The challenge is understanding that the about page, its purpose is not really to tell people about who you, the photographer, are, or to tell them about your history. Once again, because if we're just being real, nobody cares, right? Think about how somebody gets to your about page and when they get to your about page. So let's say you're a wedding, we'll use wedding photographer as an example. So you're a wedding photographer, somebody has finally made it to your about page. That is not where they first meet you. They've seen your photos, maybe on Pinterest, maybe on Instagram. Maybe they saw the gallery on your website already. Maybe it was on Facebook. Maybe it was good old fashioned word of mouth where, you know, a friend of theirs, you did their wedding, whichever. But by the time they get to that about page, they essentially are familiar with your work and they're very interested because, come on, we all know how it is surfing the internet. If you're not interested, you're not clicking again, you're going elsewhere, done. So by the time a potential client comes to your about page, you've actually got them hooked. This is where you seal the deal. So what is it that they really want to know? They don't want to know that you've been taking pictures for 40 years or for 4 years. What they really want to know is, especially for a bride, what is it going to be like? What is this person like? Do I want to trust this person with the most important day of my life? Are they a jerk? Are they a pain in the butt? What are they like? So it's a real fine balance. Yes, you want to give people some information about you, and you need to make it sincere. But really what you need to be talking about is stories, snippets, little things that will give them a sense of how passionate you are about shooting weddings, how much fun you like to have, how meaningful it is for you to be a part of the most important day of this couple's life. But you can't come straight out and say it, because then it sounds like a sales pitch. You can't say, like, I'm the most passionate wedding photographer you'll find in town, right? That's just BS. In fact, try to avoid the word passion, because it's a word that gets abused so much. But yeah, indeed, tell stories. And that same concept translates to a social media post. Photographers go on Instagram, they go on Facebook or Pinterest, and it's like, here's either one picture or 50 pictures from a wedding. like anybody except the bride and her family cares because they weren't there. So number one, realize you can look like a rock star with 5 pictures and you can look like a hack with 10. But better yet, when you post that wedding picture, instead of posting 50 pictures or even 5 pictures, post one and tell a little story. And maybe what you do is you drip that wedding out over a month even. So the very first one is simply a little story about the bride and groom and how blessed you were to be picked to spend the most important day of their lives, recording it with them, and how fun and how wonderful it was. Then maybe on that second day, maybe there's a little anecdote where you, in fact, I know a young woman who's a photographer here in my area who's a wedding photographer. And one of the things that she actually uses as part of her sales pitch is that she's been shooting weddings so long, how she's kind of like the bride's backup for every little problem. And she actually, on her website, very brilliantly, she has pictures of her helping a bride actually sew up a little tear in a dress by a button, and helping a bride put another piece of the dress on and things like that. So it's this idea of like, look, I'm not just going to come take your pictures. I'm there for you. And so maybe, your day 2 post from that wedding is a little anecdote about something that almost went sideways, and kind of how, and don't make yourself sound like a superhero, but make it sound like how you were involved in helping them make sure that that got, worked out. And then here's a picture that represents it. It's making that human connection with your work, because you have to remember, folks, that when you post a picture, obviously you had the experience, and that picture has meaning to you beyond the experience, in the sense of, this is the best that I've ever done with that kind of picture. So I'm really proud of this. But for anyone else that looks at that image, they're not going to have that experience.
Right.
Their experience is not going to be anything close to that. In fact, more often than not, the pictures that have the most meaning to us have the least impact on someone else that looks at them, right? It just does. So by sharing a little bit of that story, and I get it, folks, this takes a little bit of extra work and a little bit of extra effort, but by doing that, it shows you as a human being with empathy, a human being who is sincere, a human being who is excited about what you do, where it matters. And a little side note to go with that, that also means when you build your websites, stop with the us and the we stuff. It's you. If you are literally a wedding photographer that's got, 6 other shooters and all that kind of stuff, that's fine. But do understand, when you talk about us and you make it sound like a big company, you also make yourself sound more expensive before you ever actually get to talking about price. So if it's you, be you.
Right.
And make that connection, because that's, at the end of the day, that's what's happening. It's you going to shoot that wedding. It's you interacting with that couple. So I would say, if there's one thing, honestly, that's the one area where almost every photographer could really use some work, is with their marketing, connecting with their audience and helping their audience essentially solve their own problems. And that applies for commercial photographers, no different than it does for a wedding or a portrait photographer.
That's such great advice. Joe, thank you so much for your time today. As we're kind of checking out here, is there any last piece of advice you'd give our audience as we are kind of coming out of this and getting ready to get back to work? And
just honestly, keep at it. Stay the course. I mean, I know it's a big fight for a lot of people, but I like to look at this as opportunity. I mean, the last couple of months has really sucked, let's face it. But even with the changes that we're going to see, even with the way the industry is going to evolve, I think it's opportunity, because one of the things you have to understand, folks, about business is anytime there are major changes and there's major upheaval in any kind of industry, that does mean there's opportunity. So the whole evolution concept, this is it. I mean, you need to be paying attention to the changes that are happening. And in a big way, these kinds of upheavals, they level the playing field a little bit more, and they do create opportunity for new players to establish themselves. And for the people that have been at it, they just, the pressure on them is to be smart and also to adapt. But for those of you that are trying to kind of get into the mix, there's no better time than right now. There really isn't.
Pay attention to those opportunities that arise and kind of look for ways to create your own opportunities, being proactive. Joe, thank you so much again for joining us. We appreciate your time, and we look forward to chatting with you again.
Thank you so much. Anytime.